here we're going to be covering the different fields of information within the contact information section in a client file. Starting at the very top, we have this show additional contact information banner. If I click on this, it's going to open up more fields of information that we have. If I click on it again, it's going to show less. It's going to show more, and you'll see that our section's broken down with primary, spouse, primary address, secondary contact, and permissions. Starting with the primary and the access code. So the access code within Atom is a client identifier. It needs to be unique for every client, which is why their social typically works the best, especially if you are a Drake, Crosslink, or TaxWise client, because you need that for that EF data import. But so long as this value is unique, it can be used for the client, and just means that no other client can have this value in their client file. But again, their social is going to work the best. We have a spot for the first name, last name, middle initial, nickname even. We have a date of birth and a date of death. Also computes their age. We have a checkbox for blocked, and if I click on that and hit save, and when I go to search for our client now, Mike Tester, you see that they now have a brown background behind their name. So you can use this blocked checkbox here to have any in-house definition that you want it to have. You can have it mean for your office that this is a client that you don't really want to work with. So you can check that, of course hit save, and then when anyone pulls up their file, they'll have this brown background in there, and that should be a red flag saying, hey, this is someone that we don't want to work with. You'll also see that on the home page with our office events. I think he was in review. Yeah, so Mike Tester's in the in review, and you'll see that that brown background is also displayed here. And the same applies to other language. I could have just clicked on other language. All right, so other language indicates that our client Mike Tester prefers to speak a different language, and instead of a brown background, they will have a purple background. If I just refresh this here, we'll see that. All right, we'll see that they have this purple background indicating that Mike Tester speaks a different language. And if we were to search for him, again, they would still have that purple background. Another thing that the other language checkbox does is that for your predefined messages, there is a section where you can set up a message to go out that is in a different language, and you can set that up, and then once this is checked for a client, that message will get sent out rather than the English message. All right, so then below that we have the email, we have evening phone, cell phone, and day phone. We also have this checkbox for default, and that makes it so if you have Twilio, which is the two-way texting that you can sign up for, whenever this number texts into the software, say that this client has this number and there is another client in the software that has this number. Whenever this number texts into the software, if this is checked, it means that that message will be applied to this client by default. So then below that section we have the special condition, and this is just a way to indicate if Mike Tester has a special condition. For example, if he can't climb stairs very well, you could write that down here, and then it will be notated in the client file as sort of just an alert in case if there's anything that your office needs to do or change in order to help accommodate this client. In the top right here, we have this saying that this is an individual client file. You can choose between that or a business file. This PIN field is for e-signing with our client portal. You can set up their PIN here that they'll need for e-signing. This password is how they get into the client portal, and you can set that password up here if you want. We have this default all communication to, and what this does is that this will default all communication, so any portal, email, or text message, whenever it comes in, it will default all of that information to a particular Atom user. Then we have 3 checkboxes to stop sending any mailers, to disable the emails, and also to disable SMS. So if we want to turn any of that stuff off, we can just check those boxes. We have a spot for the cell phone provider, which works with the default way of texting, and you'll need to know that, and their cell phone if you want to send a text message the default way. We have a field for the fax number, and then a field for the client's time zone. Below that, in the spouse section, we have a spot for their social, first name, last name, middle initial, nickname, pretty much the same sort of fields in the primary section. Email, phone numbers, date of birth, date of death, computes the age, fax number here, and then also the spouse will have their own PIN for e-signing if there's anything that they need to e-sign. But do note that this password is shared between both the primary and the spouse. So in order for the primary or the spouse to log in, it is with the same password, but to e-sign, they will each have their own PIN. Then lastly, in the spouse section, we have divorced and married filing separate. If we check this divorced here and then hit save, this indicates that they divorced in 2019, and so if we were to make Mike Tester's 2020 client file when he comes in, it will drop the spouse. And the same thing will happen if he uses Adam's self check-in screen. When he signs in that way for his 2020 tax return, it will drop this spouse. And if the spouse tries to use that self check-in screen next year, then the software will create for her a new client file. And then for married filing separate, it's just an indicator that they are married and filing separate. And also too, in the lobby status, it will display this next to their name, indicating that they are in fact married and filing separate. Below that, we have the primary address, which has the usual address fields. So address, city, state, zip code, province, country, all that good stuff. The secondary address has the exact same fields. Secondary contact is where if there is a secondary contact for the file, you can put their first and last name, email, various phone numbers, and then also a relationship field to indicate how they relate to the primary and the spouse. And then lastly, we have this permissions section, and this is just a way to help limit Atom user access to particular client files. So by default, all Atom users have access to all client files. However, if we wanted to make it so only Jim has access to this client file, we could do so by clicking on his name here and hitting save. And in doing so, it will make it so only Jim could find this client file. One thing to note though, that any Atom user that has the administrator status kind of overrides what's set up in here. So say if we did set it up to where only Jim can view this, but Melvin and Sally were admins within the software, they could still find this client file because they were admins, even though we've set it to where only Jim could view this client file. So that is it on the different fields of information within the contact information section in a client file, and I thank you for watching.